Well, welcome to this next update on the nowRail model railway control system. And today I'm going to be talking about the latest version, which is 0.7.2, and the updates that have been made for this version. Now, I was hoping that 0.7 would bring some quite interesting new features. I've been working on a NCE Cab Bus interface. In fact, if we look at the test bed that I've got on the workbench at the moment, you can see that I have a JMRI, I've got a DCC-EX, this one's a monitor. This is the NCE control panel, and this one goes straight on to Cab Bus, and the demos have worked really well. And obviously here I have a complete controller that's running on nowRail. So by now I was hoping to sort of have the NCE features installed. However, something came up. And the item that came up was completely unexpected. I must admit, it caught me out. Usually when you start your Arduino IDE, down in the bottom right, you'll get some messages about, some of your libraries need updating, or some board managers need updating, or whatever. And usually you just don't think about them, you just click on them and install them. However, one of the things that I hadn't updated, I've tended to not update libraries because certain libraries I've got, if you update them, they cause a problem. But one that I had missed was the expressive library for the ESP-32, and this is under your board manager. And I was using version 2.0.17 quite happily, and without noticing it had gone to version 3. Now version 3 is a major upgrade. Expressives themselves have changed their underlying system, and that has meant that version 3 is not just adding a few extra boards, it actually changes a lot of the functionality. And some functions that I have used for years suddenly don't work the same way, or just break altogether. And unfortunately, some of those items were to do with ESP-NOW. So thanks to the testers, one of the testers picked this up. They couldn't get the nowRail to compile. And when we looked into it, it was all down to the fact they were using version 3. And therefore nowRail has had to have quite an update over this last month. The easiest update method for me would have just been to insist that everybody installs version 3 of the library. However, because that causes so many other code breaking areas in other parts of ESP usage, nowRail has now been written so that if you've got version 3 or the old version 2 version, nowRail will now cope with whichever version you are using and will make its changes internally without the user having to change any settings or anything like that. For the user, it's invisible, but underneath it has been a bit of a pain, to put it mildly. Now, the other major change that's been made has been due to this controller. So what I have been doing with the controller is working away. This is a full, fully working controller, loco controller. It's got a fast clock system. You can select libraries of locos internally. All that's been built into nowRail. However, one of the issues that I discovered while building this was that there was a conflict with certain libraries. So if you look at these two versions of nowRail, this is the 0.72 version, and down here I've got, actually it's an old 0.4. And the way I built nowRail was you have the intro screen, the custom functions, nowRail.cpp, nowRail.h, and there used to be user_setup.h. However, user_setup.h conflicted with another library So it has had to be renamed nowRail _user _setup.h. I was a little bit annoyed about this, as I have really tried to keep the file format exactly the same. The information, you know, these files are interchangeable. You can literally copy and paste your data from one to the other, but I have been trying to keep the file names exactly the same. Now, the reason for that is if someone wanted to upgrade. So if you can imagine, we've got this old 0.4 version. This is using a GT911 touchscreen. The goal of nowRail is that you can take the user setup data, if you like, copy that straight into what will now be the nowRail user setup.h, and then on the initial screen, if you copied this page straight into a new version of nowRail, the code, the way that the functions are set up, will instantly then run on 0.7.2 without you having to make any other changes. If you're making just using standard functions, literally putting your first screen into the new version will immediately make the new version run your code just as it did with the old version. The reason for this was obviously to make an easier upgrade path. The other thing just to be aware of is that if I was running this 0.4 version, I could have that running a controller. This was actually written to have a GT911 touchscreen system, but I can leave that on 0.4. I do not need to upgrade that controller at all to run alongside a 0.7 version. The transmission data is a set format and will not need to be upgraded. If I add extra features into later versions, the way nowRail is written is that this old version will just ignore the new features and just run with the features that it needs for the code that it was written to perform. So the next thing I'm just going to show you is how to build more complicated projects. And let's be honest, things like touchscreen controllers are an interesting project to build. And these items, you know, they're not the easiest to build. However, nowRail has got a facility built in to help you with some of these items. Now, the goal with the touchscreen controller is eventually I'm hoping to release not only the code, the circuits, but also the STL files to actually build that controller. Now, going back to nowRail, I'm just going to show you the difference between, if you like, a standard nowRail and the way that that controller was built. So you can see that we've got the intro screen. Obviously, for each setup, I rename it and obviously save it as something else. You've then got custom functions, nowRail CPP, nowRail.h, and the nowRail user setup. Now you'll notice that I've got extra tabs for an encoder, the screen, the touch, and also the fonts that I am using. The important thing from a nowRail point of view is that what I was trying to do was write nowRail in a way that no one touches nowRail.cpp or nowRail.h. You can use these almost as if they were a class, as if they were a library. There should be no need to edit those files. What you do is you go to custom functions, and in the custom functions, there are a whole load of ways to interact with nowRail. So here, for instance, I've got a now loco function update. So this means that when a loco function has been updated somewhere on the system, then this function gets called with these variables. And in this case, I've added my own custom code that will update the loco functions on screen 1 of my controller. The same with the clock speed. So if I go back to the webcam If I update the clock speed, which is up here, this is the fast clock for the layout. And as you can see, as I update it, the actual clock speed starts to run faster. As I do that, rather than having to, if you like, dig into nowRail CPP to figure out how does the system do it, I literally go to nowRail clock speed update, and any time a clock speed update occurs, I can then put my own function in here, which then calls my code in my own custom written code. That means, if you like, that my custom code is kept outside of the nowRail system. And as we go down here, obviously there's some GTT 911s, there's some other functions that are in here. And as nowRail is being updated and as I build these different projects, it allows me to see which items need to be added to the custom function list. And one of the items that I'd like to add in here is a speed control. The reason for that is, although it wouldn't be useful for the project that I'm currently working on, it would then allow the speed to be recorded if I wanted to use an ESP32 as the decoder in a loco. So if I could have the speed and the functions being sent over directly to an ESP32, I could actually skip having to put a DCC decoder in my locos and put a small ESP32 in there instead. That's an interesting project for the future. So for this version of nowRail, I just added the two functions that you've just seen. I do have some other items that I've been working on. So within the nowRail system, there is an array that stores data for 200 locos. nowRail has a system that can have the whole, there's a built-in EEPROM systems to save all your settings. And so within nowRail, there is this system that can have 200 locos, but I also wanted a recall system so that I can just click a button and get one of the, if you like, the last 10 locos that have been used on my current controller. So that was something I was working on just as ESP32 caused a problem. So hopefully that will be integrated into the next version along with the NCE Cab Bus integration. Now, talking of the NCE Cab Bus integration, that has also led to quite a few changes under the lid, so to speak, and that's been to do with loco functions, so that a single controller could send information to, say, DCC-EX or to a NCE product, and going forwards it'll work with LocoNet as well, I hope, and anything else that anybody wants. So if you look at the controller, on the right hand side of the screen is the controller, on the left hand side is DCC-EX. So as I turn the speed, you can see the speed functions, but if I now just freeze this on the left, you can see that this is actually sending out commands for loco 102. Let's just let that scroll up, and then once again, if I set various functions, you can see, I'll just freeze that the function commands are also sent through. Now the goal is that when the NCE system is added, rather than having a nowRail that is connected to DCC-EX, I want a very simple connection, and it's going to be straight into the cab bus system using an RS485 connection. And in my tests so far, my power cab happily receives commands from this exactly the same controller, no mods made to the controller, but if you like, the node, the nowRail node just sends the information straight through to an NCE controller, just as it does to DCC-EX. The joy of that, from my point of view, is one controller fits all. So I will continue to do tests with this one half of my test bed. I've got obviously this test bed here. I do actually have another test bed on the next workbench that has yet more ESP32s and 8266s running different versions of nowRail just so that I can check that everything is compatible. But I hope that this sort of little video today has given you a bit of an idea of the direction that nowRail is going in. The reason I've shown the back of this controller just down here, obviously it has a LiPo battery in it, because it's got a cable at the moment connected through because I want it reading out onto the screen its various outputs. But obviously this is a, if you like, a wireless, well, wire-free system, and I'm hoping that all the controls can be wire-free going forwards. So I think that's most of the information about what's going on with the nowRail system. A big thanks to those who have been testing the system. It's just been great to have some feedback, both the good news and the bad news. It hasn't all gone well, but modifications are coming along and it's working well. So if you're interested, download a copy. It's all free. I'm not going to be charging for this. My goal is just to be able to add extra facilities in for anybody on their model railway. So if there's any particular features that you want more information on, please just stick a comment under the video or email me off the nowRail page on the Digital Town website and I'll get back to you. I can always do some more videos, and if there's a particular feature that you want adding, please let me know and I'll see what can be done. Others have asked and we've managed to integrate them, so I'm sure there's plenty more that can be integrated. So that's it for now. Hopefully I shall now get on with version 0.8. Bye for now.